Chapter 2 of Boruto Two Blue Vortex resurrected a popular theory that Boruto will travel back in time, more specifically the time of the 4th Great Ninja War. This all stems from this panel that showed a mysterious figure off in the distance observing the events of the battle versus Kaguya. Now this video isn't a recap of that theory because I don't believe that Boruto traveled to the past just to gather information on that battle. What I believe is that Boruto traveled to that time period with the goal of plucking Kaguya from a point in time that wouldn't destroy the timeline. Now the obvious question would be why? Why would Boruto want to save Kaguya? What relevance does she serve to the story? Well, the answer is actually very simple. Kaguya is the only person in existence that holds the knowledge of every single thing that has ever happened in this world. Not only that, what's more fascinating is that her genetic material itself holds the essence of every single being that has ever set foot on this planet. You see, a lot of people miss this, but back in chapter 55, when Isshiki's soul presented himself to Code, he said to him that his soul will dissipate shortly, but he cannot allow the Otsutsuki's will to be snuffed out as well. Not when they have devoured countless planets and continuously evolved over thousands of years. He then told Ko to consecrate Boruto or Kawaki to the Ten Tails and cultivate the divine tree, that way he can procure the chakra fruit it creates in the end. Now the end goal of all of this is so that Ko can upgrade himself and become a brand new Otsutsuki. This makes sense since, as explained by Amado, Otsutsukis are alien parasites whose only goal is to devour the life of a planet. They do this by planting a large divine tree into the ground. Its roots then grows deeply, reaching across every corner of the planet and sucks the chakra from all living things. This tree then produces a chakra fruit once it has finished absorbing everything. These chakra fruits are explained to be large lumps of tremendous energy and genetic information. Otsutsukis continuously update themselves by eating them. That is how they evolve. This of course explains the logic of Code consuming this chakra fruit, then updating himself and evolving as well. However, there's one missing thing. Why would Code consuming a chakra fruit make him an Otsutsuki? And why does he need to feed Boruto or Kawaki to the tree in order to attain this fruit? Well, as Amado later went on to explain, Otsutsuki's always utilize the Ten Tails when assaulting a planet because the Ten Tails is what becomes the divine tree. The Ten Tails is a seedling they first plant into the ground, which grows into the divine tree and consumes the planet, thus bearing the chakra fruit. The important thing to note is that you can't just bury the Ten Tails in the soil then water it for it to become the divine tree. There's one special condition that must be met. That being, you must feed a living Otsutsuki to the Ten Tails. This is why the Otsutsukis travel in pairs, because one needs to be fed to the god tree while the other Otsutsuki procures the fruit it creates. This also explains why Code needs to feed Boruto to the god tree in order to bear his chakra fruit. This of course leads into Code becoming an Otsutsuki, since feeding Boruto to the Ten Tails would introduce Otsutsuki DNA into the process of molding that fruit. Now, not only would Code gain Boruto's Otsutsuki DNA from consuming this fruit, it's also stated that the chakra fruit itself is a crystallization of the planet's life. It shall contain everything, a record of all life that ever lived and died on this planet, including Isshiki himself. I want you guys to understand the true scope of what this actually means. Not only would someone gain newfound power from this chakra fruit, but also a record of everyone that has ever set foot on the planet, along with the history of what had occurred. This is where Kaguya's relevance comes into play, because Kaguya is the only person in existence to have ever consumed a chakra fruit molded by the essence of this planet, which means Kaguya not only has the knowledge of everything that has ever occurred on this planet, but also the genetic material of everyone who has ever lived or died on the planet itself. Trust me, this all leads back to why Boruto goes back in time to free Kaguya. Because as I mentioned, not only is Kaguya the only person who possesses the knowledge Boruto needs due to her consuming the chakra fruit, but also because Kaguya had meddled with the memories of every human on the planet, which was even referenced by Momoshiki in chapter 79. For this to make sense, let's go back to when Kaguya first arrived on the planet. What we know is that the god tree was already planted, and it's implied by a side character that it has been there for over several millennia. Kaguya's only mission along with Isshiki was to procure the chakra fruit. It is implied by Amado that Kaguya was meant to be fed to the god tree to provide vitality for the fruit, and the fruit itself should have been returned to the Otsutsuki clan. Amado also confirmed or theorized that Kaguya betrayed Isshiki and attacked him while he was off guard, which resulted in him shrinking and flying into the head of a nearby monk called Jigen. Kaguya then lived peacefully amongst the humans and was later impregnated by an emperor called Tenji. Now after she herself was betrayed by this emperor, she consumed the chakra fruit for herself and used its power and her newly awakened Rena Sharingan to place the entire planet under the infinite Tsukunomi Genjutsu. She did this because she loved the planet and wanted to stop all the wars amongst the humans. Now she later released some of the humans from the infinite Tsukunomi because she didn't want all of them to die. She later had two sons called Hamura and Hagoromu, who after finding out about the remaining humans stuck within the infinite Tsukunomi, thus being killed and turned into white Zetsus, decided to confront Kaguya. She informed them that she must do this to protect the planet from invaders later revealed to be Momoshiki, Kinshiki, and Urashiki. However, the two brothers didn't agree with her methods and tried to stop her. Their betrayal led to Kaguya, who was betrayed once before, launching an all-out attack on the brothers in an effort to regain the chakra she had shared with them. The brothers in the end ended up sealing Kaguya using 6 paths Shibaku Tensei, and both went their separate ways. Hamura decided to guard Kaguya on the newly created moon, while Hagoromu remained on the planet to later share his chakra with every human in order to connect everyone through the concept of Ninshu. Now as you guys know, this chakra was later used by the humans to wage war against each other and resulted in the formation of clans who shared similar bloodline traits as a result of that chakra. The most prominent of all being the Senju and Uchiha, who were direct descendants of Hagoromu's bloodline through his sons Ashura and Indra, while the Hyuga clan members are all descendants of Hamura, who went to the moon at the end of the battle with Kaguya, which likely means that some of Hamura's descendants migrated from the moon to the planet as well. I say all of this to establish a chakra link between every human who uses chakra and Kaguya herself, whilst also providing a brief history of the universe. Now you guys might be wondering, how does Kaguya have a record of everything that happened on the planet if she got sealed by Hagoromu multiple centuries ago? Well, that's where Black Zetsu comes in. You see, moments before Kaguya got sealed, she created a physical manifestation of her will in the form of Black Zetsu, who later went on to record and shape the ninja world all according to his will. This information of course was passed on to Kaguya the moment she was resurrected, which is showed by her knowing everything about the existing characters, including Ashura and Indra. Now that part isn't really relevant to the theory itself, but I just wanted to show that Kaguya does have information about what happened after she was sealed. Now when it comes to what Boruto truly needs from Kaguya, it all goes back to the true history of the Ten Tails, well at least the original Ten Tails. You see, in the recent chapter, Boruto said that Code doesn't understand the true horrors of the Ten Tails. This is of course in reference to the claw grimes Code created by infusing the Ten Tails itself with his claw marks. Code then replied to Boruto saying that they're just beasts that will instinctively bite anyone in their vicinity until they eventually run into an actual Otsutsuki. This makes perfect sense because, as I said before, the Ten Tails turns into the God Tree after consuming an Otsutsuki. However, Boruto then replied by saying that might normally be the case, but these ones are different thanks to you enhancing them. You need to scrap them while you're still able to control them, or we'll end up in the worst possible future for everyone. Now this is absolutely insane. Of course we already knew that these clawgrams were somewhat different from the fission beings we saw in the war with the original Ten Tails, but this implies it's something more sinister. This brings me back to the original Ten Tails again, because what we know is that you need to feed a living Otsutsuki to the Ten Tails in order for it to become a divine tree and produce a chakra fruit. However, for some reason, Kaguya didn't need to do that for this planet, because as I explained earlier, Kaguya, when she arrived on the planet, the divine tree was already there. A side character even stated that it has been there for over several millennia. This simply means that Kaguya and Isshiki didn't plant this tree. And this is also supported by the fact that Isshiki had his own Ten Tails but didn't get to plant it. That of course being the Ten Tails that now exist in Boruto. Then that begs the question, who planted this divine tree and why didn't they procure its chakra fruit? Because as I mentioned before, the Otsutsuki travel in pairs because one needs to be fed to the Ten Tails while the other Otsutsuki procures the fruit. However, with this Ten Tails, we have no idea who got fed to it or why the fruit wasn't harvested until several millennia later when Kaguya did so. Now of course, maybe you could say that the Ten Tails does take thousands of years to bear a chakra fruit, so the original Otsutsukis who planted this divine tree just left it and then they sent Kaguya and Isshiki to come collect it 1,000 years later. That is a possibility, but the only issue with that theory is what Isshiki said to Code. He told him to feed Boruto or Kawaki to the Ten Tails and procure its fruit. If it's that the Ten Tails normally takes thousands of years to bear a single fruit, Code would simply die of old age before that happens. It just doesn't make sense. this. So what I believe is that something similar to what Code has done happened in the past as well. Only this occurred long before the existence of civilization itself, back when Shibai first arrived on the planet. Now as you guys know, Shibai was a being that existed on this plane of existence, but later ascended into godhood after repeatedly undergoing karmic resurrection and devouring multiple fruits over several millennia. Amado also said that it's possible that he was killed, but also theorized that after many cycles of evolution, he ascended to a higher plane of existence or a higher dimension where a physical body is no longer required. So the hypothesis is that Shibai deliberately discarded his own body and ascended to a higher plane of existence. Now Momoshiki did confirm that Shibai is no longer within this dimension, but that doesn't mean that Momoshiki knows why or how. You see, Momoshiki does know a lot about the Otsutsuki's and the Ten Tails, so Boruto wouldn't need to travel to the past to learn what the Ten Tails is capable of in general. He could even ask Sasuke if Momoshiki doesn't want to relay that information. However, what Momoshiki and Sasuke wouldn't be privy to is what specifically happened on this planet with the original Ten Tails, and that's simply because they weren't there, and neither has Momoshiki consumed a chakra fruit from this planet. So the only person in existence Boruto could get that information from is Kaguya. So what I think happened is that Boruto and Sasuke discovered hidden text or scrolls that reference what happened with the original Ten Tails pre-Kaguya's arrival on the planet, along with information on Shibai Otsutsuki and his partner. But the issue is that the text didn't show the full story, so they needed someone to explain to them what happened, or someone to provide them with what they need to stop it from happening again. That's what led to Boruto traveling to the past during the battle with Kaguya, specifically the closing portion of that battle moments before she was sealed. You see, in this universe, it's already established that time travel works in the old-fashioned way, as seen in the time slip arc in the Boruto anime. So if you change something in the past, you will alter the future. To avoid this, Boruto doesn't stop Kaguya from being sealed. He allowed it to happen, then removed the seal using whatever technique he procured for that specific task. This means that the timeline itself will remain intact, since Kaguya being removed from Shibako Tensei in her time space without anyone's knowledge wouldn't change the outcome of the original timeline. Boruto would then convince Kaguya to cooperate, which I think is possible since Kaguya wasn't pure evil to begin with, and the threat of the Otsutsuki she wanted the army for has already been dealt with. Now I know people will say that Kaguya is dead in the comments because she's said to be dead in Momoshiki's databook, but the thing is that we know she isn't truly dead, as in her soul was not extinguished, she was just sealed using the same jutsu that sealed her in the past, yet she was able to come back with the help of Black Zetsu the first time around. And even after being sealed again by Naruto and Sasuke, Black Zetsu himself said that he would just start again and have her resurrected once again. This simply means that Kaguya can indeed return to the story. Along with the fact that Kurama stated that the Ten Tails Jinchuriki aren't like the others. They won't die if you just remove the Biju. That's because the Ten Tails husk itself remains and it contains a lot of life force energy. And if we go back to when Kaguya was sealed, we see that she was merged with the Ten Tails husk and sealed alongside it, which means that Kaguya should have been preserved by the life force it contains. So even if we believe that she died over time after the life force was completely sucked away, it's possible that Boruto is able to save her before that happens. Now the real question is, how does Boruto travel to the past? Where does he get this ability from? Well, what I've realized is that Boruto's anime likes to foreshadow the events of the manga in different ways. You see, the events of Kaguya happened over 1,000 years ago, which means that Isshiki has been inside the head of Jigen in this shrunken state for over 1,000 years. We know he hasn't left Jigen's body since he needs it in order to survive after what Kaguya did to him. What this simply means is that the shrinking ability has been active on Ishiki's body for over 1,000 years non-stop, which is absolutely ridiculous. We know this shouldn't be possible since Kawaki was drained of his stamina and chakra after having Sukuna Ikona active for the better part of a day. And I'm fully aware of the fact that Isshiki likely has better control over the ability since he's the original user. But 1,000 years is a little bit ridiculous when considering the fact that stamina also plays a part in how long you can use the ability, not just your chakra reserves. What we also know is that selecting someone to bear karma is actually a delicate process since not everyone is compatible or possess a body that can handle the true power of the Otsutsuki. This was the case for Jigen, as he stated that Ishiki's chakra was too massive for his body, so Jigen's body started to weaken over time. This led to Isshiki choosing not to resurrect within Jigen's body since he would likely die within a few days even though Jigen was 100% Otsutsukified. So basically what they're saying is that we're expected to believe that Isshiki remained in a dying body over 1,000 years while having keeping his shrinking ability active the entire time. Even though using this ability is stated to make the body die faster, it just doesn't make sense. Now time travel would be a better way to string things together, in that Isshiki didn't stay in a cave for over 1,000 years in a dying body, ignoring all historical events. Instead, he traveled to the future version of the timeline using the time travel turtle. Now this might sound crazy, but hear me out for a second. A lot of people are under the misconception that Isshiki was the one who initially had this turtle when it was first introduced, but that's not the case. The time travel turtle called Karasuki was introduced in Boruto episode 127, where it's said by the newscaster that an ancient relic was discovered on the sea floor and that efforts are currently underway to break the sealing jutsu placed on it. What they also noticed is that it had an unusual pattern carved into it, which Boruto later connected to a location where they found one of the missing buds of the divine tree. Isshiki himself later confirmed that the turtle is a tool of the Otsutsuki, but he only found out that they had possession of it over the news. He then stole the device and used it to travel back in time so that he can take Naruto's 9 tails power from him when he was just a child. So in essence, the turtle is a tool used by the Otsutsuki to travel through time. Now I have no clue what the rules are for this device, but it's highly likely that Isshiki traveled to the future using this turtle so that he could find a proper vessel. It does make sense since humans during Kaguya's time likely didn't have the body required in order to be a perfect vessel. What's also possible is that Jigen needed a scientist who could create a method in which a vessel could also pass karma onto someone else. I do believe that Isshiki needs to be in physical contact with someone in order to impart karma, as he did with Kawaki. However, he's unable to do so since he can't leave the brain of Jigen, so he had to find a way in which Jigen himself could pass the karma seal onto new vessels, and that's where Amado and the technology we see him create comes in for Jigen. This is why we see Jigen randomly appearing to Amado in chapter 75, promising to help resurrect his daughter if he helps him attain his goals. So in essence, either that time travel turtle belonged to Isshiki or he has one for himself, which is very plausible. What this implies is that Isshiki arrived to this future timeline the same year Amado's daughter passed away, which is also the same year Boruto was born. This lines up perfectly with the timeline as it explains why Jigen's dying body survived this long. It also explains why Isshiki was never present for any of the events in the past, especially the one where all life on the planet was about to be wiped out by the moon. This wouldn't have been good for Isshiki since he still didn't have a vessel at that time, and he also needs an alive planet and humans to cultivate a proper divine tree. So it does make more sense that he just wasn't there. He basically skipped out on that part of the timeline to give humans more time to develop the technology he would need to conduct karmic transferal through his current vessel. This makes way more sense than Isshiki just deciding to create the Kara organization after 1,000 years of doing nothing. Now there is this argument that Isshiki could have just left the planet after realizing that Isshiki wasn't compatible and that the body was dying. He does have space-time ninjutsu, so he should have been able to just leave the planet and went to another one to find another vessel. However, we have to take into account the possibility that it isn't easy to find a planet with life, or maybe he thought Jigen's body wouldn't last that long. So using the turtle to travel 1,000 years into the future would make more sense to an Otsutsuki. Or maybe Jigen just sat there in the Daikokuten dimension where time doesn't flow, so that's how the body was preserved. Although it would still be conscious the entire time, and why wait over 1,000 years to emerge? I would rather the time travel theory because I think it makes more sense, okay? So in essence, I believe that Boruto will either find the turtle they used in the anime, or they will use Ishiki's turtle if he has one for himself. Now of course there is one problem with the theory itself, right? You could say, why didn't Boruto just travel back to the time of Shibai to see it for himself? But as I said before, I have no idea what the limitations on this turtle are. So it could be that the turtle can't go back that far in history, or it has some other limitations that I can't think about right now, but of course you guys can let me know in the comment section down below. So in essence, I believe that Boruto will go back in the past during the time of the Fourth Great War to save Kaguya from Chibaku Tensei, and then of course they'll just team up, compare information. Boruto will get information he needs to stop the current threat, and then maybe Kaguya gets redeemed or whatever. They even have Orochimaru, bro. Orochimaru is in the village helping them at this point in time. He has done worse things than Kaguya. Worst, way worse, okay? So if he can be allowed to just live, under strict, conditions, I'm sure they can team up with Kaguya, Kaguya isn't really evil. She isn't pure evil, right? She was just betrayed, and she was scared that the Otsutsukis were coming to the planet to take over, and she needed to protect it. That's the history we know, right? So she did some bad bad things. Okay, I'm not saying that she didn't, but I believe that they can come together to stop the current threat if they really need to. And just one more thing, people like to say that this person standing on the hill is Sakura, but that doesn't make sense because as is shown in this panel here, Sakura is on the ground beside Obito just moments before he ran in front of Naruto. So there's no way Sakura just teleported on the hill like miles away from where they are. It just doesn't make sense. Now the other theory is that it's Isshiki, but it really doesn't make sense since based on when he got the turtle, he went straight to Naruto and then he lost the turtle and was destroyed. So I don't think it was Isshiki. I do think it makes more sense that it's Boruto. But we can always have fun and theorize and we can make Isshiki work if we want to, but that's not the topic of this video. But let me know your thoughts on the theory in general. Do you think Boruto will go back to resurrect Kaguya to get the information he needs? Do you think she holds some secret to defeating the current threat or future threat? And do you think Kaguya will be redeemed? Whatever. Do you like Kaguya? Let me know in the comment section down below. Drop a like if you like the video and subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.